substance abuse and drug prevention.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So you ready? You want to kick it off?
Absolutely. Again, man, thank y'all so much for being with us today. We are excited to partner with the Convene here. The 108 Challenge. We are just absolutely excited about this, our first ever live webinar. We want to start out with, we're all about, youth and teens and students and them expressing their talents and living a life of being drug-free. We are honored to have a young lady here from Thomasville, North Carolina, that's going to open up our event. You'll see how amazing she is. Let me give her a little quick bio of Madison Jackson, resident of Thomasville, North Carolina. Madison is 15 years old and a freshman at Lefford High School. She was born in Marysville, Ohio, and moved to Thomasville, North Carolina in 2018. Madison loves to sing for the Lord. She is on the cheerleading squad and loves to spend time with her friends and family. Madison is thinking of pursuing a career in orthodontics, but she is not 100% sure just yet. She is sure of the fact that she wants to help people in some way and loves to see people smile. So with no further ado, Madison, take it away.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. Is true, I will rescue you. There is no distance. It cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear the whisper underneath your breath. I hear you whisper you have nothing left. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I will rescue you.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
And y'all see why we had Madison Jackson open up for the 108 Live. We are just so excited to have her a part of this event. On behalf of the 108 Challenge and Convene Communities, Madison Jackson, to your family, thank you so much for the opening song.
Yeah, I want to say that was amazing, man. And just before we jump to our next speaker and our main speaker for the event, for something like this, that song is so on point, right?
Absolutely. This is about hope and support, and this is about educating, and this is about impacting our youth. And that's exactly what this is about, and this is exactly what the song was about.
Yeah. All right.
So absolutely, man. So no further ado, we are so excited to have Michael DeLeon, the founder of Steered Straight, be a part of this. This is the part of our 10 a.m. session that you might want to grab your pen and paper, students, if you can remember what those are, and your iPads, your cell phones, your laptops, whatever device you're on, and type in some notes here. Write down, jot down something you didn't know before, and this is a great time to do that. Again, don't forget after this session to go and click on the student portal, get your certificate of completions. Teachers, if y'all are hearing this, please allow them to get credits. So real quick, Michael DeLeon is on a mission to educate the youth to stay on the right path when it comes to serious life issues, especially drugs and alcohol. So with no further ado, the number one school facilitator in the country, Michael DeLeon, founder of Steered Straight.
My name is Michael DeLeon, CEO and founder of Steered Straight, and I'm very proud to be part of the 108 Challenge live today. And today's topic is America's hidden pandemic and what we can do to prevent it. Parents, we all have to work together. It's great to educate kids about drugs, but you know what? If we don't educate parents, staff, community, we're missing a huge opportunity. That old adage, it takes a village, it really does, but it takes a village coming together. It takes a village working together. We've got to educate everyone about addiction because it affects everyone. It affects every part of our community. So you ever drive your car and you get that check engine light comes on, you freak out, you run to Pep Boys and get them to put the car on a machine. What code is telling me what's wrong? We have check engine lights going off on our kids, but there's not an illumination on their forehead, their dashboard, right, to tell you. But you have to see the signs, inverting, pulling away, getting more within themselves, attitudes, behavioral problems, real signs of mental illness, mental health problems. And sometimes it's not as obvious, sometimes it is. But the check engine lights are going off on our children all across our country, and we're not taking it as seriously as the check engine lights on our cars. So based on my 45 years, and I really wish I wasn't at that level, 45 years of personal experience, my addiction began at the age of 11. And I often get people to challenge me that maybe my use started at 11. It wasn't. It was addiction. I was addicted from the very first moment. My addiction began at the age of 11. So in my 45 years of experience, personal experience, I want to let you know that we're facing a national pandemic. We're creating the next generation of addicts. That's exactly what we're doing right now. And this creation is happening, some subtle, but very, very obvious, hidden in plain sight, but we're not paying attention. So just to give you an idea, we're at a 50-year high of suicide for every demographic there is in America, a 50-year high of suicide. Life expectancy has decreased 4 years in a row. And based on what's just happened in our country with the COVID-19 virus pandemic, life expectancy is going to continue to decrease as we move forward. It's kind of ironic. I've been teaching on the Spanish flu for 10 years. I've been talking about life expectancy and how it decreased 3 years in a row in 1918, 19, and 1920. And when this pandemic happened recently, it was really, really crazy to me that people were talking about what I've been talking about for virtually 10 years. And so much it has to do with respiratory disease. Psych drugs are escalating at an all-time high. Over 300 million psychiatric drugs are distributed across the country to 0 to 3-year-old infants and children. And so 100 billion opioids were prescribed for the last 9 years, which led to a heroin and an opioid pandemic. Benzos and stimulants being prescribed at higher rates than opioids were. We have the highest overdose death rate in American history, the highest drug death rate in American history. Methamphetamine and cocaine are skyrocketing at an all-time high. And adolescent use of marijuana and nicotine are at historical highs. So all those points that I made, all the bullet points that you can see on your screen, are very serious. But the most serious to me is adolescent use of nicotine and marijuana. And most people would not understand that. I want to explain to you why. Every sector of our community needs to come together. As I shared earlier, it takes a village, but it doesn't just take a village. It takes a village coming together, okay? So I lost my freedom. I spent 12 years incarcerated. You can go to steeredstraight.org and look at my story. My book, my memoir and book comes out this year, so you can pick it up and learn all about it. There's a lot of mistakes out there. There's a lot of stories out there that aren't true. There's a lot of things about why I ended up, how I ended up in prison that are, partial pictures. I spent 12 years incarcerated in prisons and halfway houses, and it was grounded in my drug addiction. So I lost my freedom for 12 years. And I don't just speak from that 12-year experience. I speak from 45 years of drug experimentation, which became drug addiction, which led to incarceration, and my fight for the last 13 years to keep kids from following in my footsteps. No parent plans for it. No parent plans for this. A kid in a khaki jumpsuit in a county jail. That's not what you're raising your kid to become. No parent plans to bury their child. I think every child should bury their parents. It shouldn't be the other way around. But parents across the country are burying children in their teen years, early 20s, early 30s to preventable death, suicide, and drugs. It's what's causing the death of our young generation. And so we have to talk about this. Parents need to talk about it, all of it. We need to come together. Parents and guardians, grandparents, aunts and uncles, we've got to have the conversations. We've got to talk to our kids about drugs and about the underlying issues that relate to drugs and drug addiction. We came up with this idea: talk to your kids about drugs over dinner. Teenagers whose families eat dinner together at least 5 nights a week, they're less likely to smoke, drink, and do drugs. Teenagers who infrequently eat dinner with their families, they're much more likely to use drugs, underage drink. That right there is self-reporting. Teens report this themselves. And the reason why this is the way it is because teenagers and young kids 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age need to hear the truth from parents. Parents and guardians need to talk to these kids about the reality from drugs and what's, behind drugs, so they don't believe the untruths from their friends, their acquaintances, or God forbid, the internet. So that's the gold standard. National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University reports this study, and you must eat dinner with your kids 5 nights a week. So can parents eat dinner with their kids 5 nights a week? Every prevention organization advocates for the family dinner time. So we at Steered Straight put a twist on it. I don't think that most parents and most families can eat dinner with their kids 5 nights a week. I don't believe it's possible. We felt it wasn't realistic with traffic and picking up your kids and cheerleading and football and choir and band and drama and 2 jobs and parents work and hectic schedules. So we advocate for the family conversation time. We no longer have 5 nights a week where you eat dinner and have conversations around the dinner table, as long as you have the 5 conversations. It could be 2 breakfasts and a lunch and 2 dinners. It could be a breakfast, a lunch, 2 dinners, and a couple of conversations at the coffee table between sitcoms. You have to sit down with your kids and have these conversations. Then we came up with the concept of dashboard conversations. A lot of times you can have those conversations in the car. And I'm not talking about a 30-minute conversation. I'm talking about a 3-minute conversation. Now, you'll be surprised how many of those 3-minute conversations turn into 30-minute conversations, but you have to just have 3-minute conversations, 5 of them a week, every week, It amounts to 15 minutes of your week. 15 minutes of your week as a parent, as a guardian, to have these conversations. But if I started talking to you about Flocka and Dab and Moon Rocks and Shatter and Triple C and Robo Tripping, would you know what I was talking about? In 2020 and the years that follow, most parents might not know the vernacular, the words, the phrases that are being used. So we came up with the conversations for you. It's called Table Talks and Dashboard Conversations, and we came up with 5 conversations a week for 52 weeks of the year. We came up with a little more than 104 family field trips for you that you could do on Saturday and Sunday, and we weave the conversation into every single one of them. So there's 364 conversations that you can have with your children about drugs and about the collateral conversations, the collateral issues that have to do with drugs, with suicide, with self-worth, with value, with spiritual principles. We absolutely have to have these conversations. We came up with all of them for you. Then we turned it into a book. I don't know if you remember those things, books. They had hardcovers and pages in the middle before apps came along. You could get Table Talks and Dashboard Conversations, the book that we developed at Steered Straight, right on our website, or you can order it online. Go to our website and check this book out. It's one of the most important resources and tools you could ever get. We also have a resource on our website, thanks to Success Foundation, coupled with Success Corporation out of Plano, Texas, who developed a book called Success for Teens. It's an 8-chapter curriculum that is absolutely second to none. It is a facilitator's guide that you can download on our website, thanks to Success Foundation. Please go to our website at steeredstraight.org and look at this amazing resource that you can work on with your kids. Also on our website is my first documentary film. I have 4 films on addiction and recovery that I directed and produced. And our first film was called Kids Are Dying. And I'm asking you to go look at it. It's on our website. I was in the middle of this heroin epidemic in New Jersey. I was dealing with so many kids that were losing their life. 4 kids very close to me lost their lives to a heroin overdose. So I decided I was going to make a film about it. And I took my camera equipment and I went to this little city called Camden, New Jersey. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Sure, it's not on your bucket list. The most beautiful people in the world and one of the most degraded cities you ever would have the misfortune of driving through, to be quite honest. I got my camera equipment and I started walking down Broadway in the middle of Camden. I was looking for someone who was hooked on heroin. It took me about 30 seconds. I walked over to her and I asked her if she would tell me her story, and she did. Her name was Christina, one of the most compelling stories I've ever heard in my life. And when I started to ask her about what was going on in her life, I realized where it all began. I interviewed 137 heroin addicts on the streets of Camden, New Jersey, and 121 of those 137 kids told me about the origin of their heroin addiction, that it began with an opioid prescription. A dentist or a doctor had prescribed an opioid pill for a rotator cuff tear, a sprained ankle, a wisdom tooth extraction. And their heroin addiction began in opioids. But when I dug a little deeper, I found out opioids wasn't the origin of heroin pandemic in America. It was earlier in their life. 137 out of 137 of the kids that I interviewed, every single one of them, they all had 3 things in common. Between the ages of 8 and 18, 100% of the kids that I interviewed used nicotine, alcohol, and marijuana. I call it the trifecta gateway: alcohol, nicotine, and THC, which is the psychoactive molecule of marijuana that gets you high. Marijuana, THC, nicotine, and alcohol is the origin of addiction for 90% of every addict in America. 90% of every addict in America starts with 3 substances, 3 addictive, mind and mood altering substances that our country has basically desensitized. 90% of all addiction, 100% of the kids that I interviewed in my first film, and 90% of the over 10,000 addicts and prisoners that I've interviewed over the last 9 years have told me the same thing: alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. Not one of the 3, 2 of the 3, all 3. Alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana between the ages of 8 and 18. I filmed the second movie called An American Epidemic, where I traveled to 30 states and I interviewed 500 parents who buried their kid to an overdose of drugs. And 500 out of those 500 told me the same thing. The origin of that addiction that led to that death began with alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. My third film is called Marijuana X, where I wanted to focus on the drug legalization movement that began in Colorado and Washington State, Alaska, and Oregon with the legalization of marijuana. It's on YouTube. It's also on our website, Marijuana X. It's something, it's 54 minutes that'll open your eyes and really start to help you question the information and the narrative that you're getting from the media about marijuana. Well, I was filming Marijuana X in Colorado. I walked into a dispensary, a marijuana retail store, and I saw two little vials on the counter. The sign next to the vials said liquid weed. I said to the kid behind the counter, "What's liquid weed?" He was so proud to tell me that now you can vape weed. You can actually take marijuana in a liquid form, in a wax form, and you can put it in a little electronic device and you can vape it. I couldn't understand how that was possible, vaping THC. So we exposed it in our movie, and what it led to, my understanding, changed my life forever. I want to quickly just tell you about THC. Tetrahydrocannabinol, the one molecule in over 300 in marijuana in the cannabis plant, that's the psychoactive molecule that gets you high. The DEA started confiscating marijuana and testing it in the early 60s. And in 1960, THC was 1%. In 2011, 51 years later, it got up to 11%. That's farmers and botanists increasing the potency of the THC molecule marijuana. So marijuana is no longer the 1% plant that God put in the ground. It had been genetically modified to become about 10 to 11% potency, which was very, very potent. Well, in 2012, Colorado legalized marijuana, and in 3 years, from 2013 to the end of 2015, cannabis THC got from a level of 11 and 12% to 37. That's no longer farmers and botanists. That's chemists and scientists and a little company called Monsanto, genetically modifying THC, extracting it out of the plant and turning it into a narcotic-like drug that changes the brain, that changes the body, changes the life of the user. It's no longer marijuana. It's not Cheech and Chong weed. It's not Woodstock weed. Now it's marijuana concentrates, and it's changing the dynamic of our country. Now, I'm not talking really about drugs. It's really not about drugs. It's about the brain and how drugs affect the brain. And the three drugs I'm most concerned about are alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. Now, if you look at the components of these drugs, alcohol by its nature is a depressant. Nicotine is a stimulant. And THC, that psychoactive molecule in the cannabis plant that gets you high, is a hallucinogen. Alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana, the trifecta gateway, is a depressant, is a stimulant, and is a hallucinogen. And no three drugs on earth are used in unison like those three. No three drugs are more marketed to kids than those three. And no three drugs used in unison marketed to kids change the brain in three unique ways. Alcohol depresses, nicotine stimulates, and THC hallucinates. So the trifecta gateway of drugs is the foundation of addiction. And if we want to change addiction in America, we'll change it by changing the origin. One of my favorite proverbs is a Chinese proverb. It says, there's two good times to plant a tree, today and 100 years ago. We can't go back 100 years to plant that tree, so we need to plant that tree today. We can't change addiction in America. We can't stop this pandemic of addiction in America. The only thing we can do is prevent it from starting in the first place. So we can't go change who's suffering by going back to their teenage years. We have to address the teenagers in America today. We have to prevent addiction from starting in the first place. And that's what I've wanted to explain to you today. So as I explained, the trifecta gateway: alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. So this hidden pandemic, this crisis that we're in, that is going to unfold even worse, that's the foundation of all addiction in America. I'd like to talk about one of the three today, incorporate marijuana in a little bit, but I want to talk to you about nicotine. The strategies of the tobacco industry from the 60s through the 90s was basically a game plan. They denied that there was any health harms. They attacked public health. They targeted kids. They formed political lobbies, and they obscured the science. That's what the tobacco industry did. And in 1994, Congress held some hearings. They were finally ready to, go after the tobacco industry for money. That's what it was all about. It wasn't really for public safety and public health, in my opinion. It was about getting money from the tobacco industry. And we understand that now in hindsight. But at the time, there was a health crisis, and we were going after big tobacco. In 1994, Congress held some hearings. And in those hearings, the top 7 CEOs and executives from the top 7 tobacco companies in America were called to Washington. And they were sitting at a little table in front of the hearing committee. And Congressman Wyden, then a congressman from Oregon, he asked all 7 CEOs and executives a question. And this was the question that he asked them. Watch this.
Yes or no? Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
So that was 1994, not 1964, where Marilyn Monroe and Ronald Reagan and John Wayne were on covers of Look and Life and magazines telling us that smoking is fine and sexy. This was 1994. We already knew that cigarettes were going to become, and were at that time, the #1 cause of death in the world. But that was a hearing that really enlightened people to see what the tobacco industry was all about. The problem was the exact same strategy and playbook is being used today, and it's our kids that are the target. The e-cigarette and the vaping industry was not created to help people quit smoking. It was created to target kids. Same play, same strategy that the tobacco industry used in the 60s through the 90s to target kids. R.J. Reynolds Vapor is the largest vapor company in the world. They happen to be part of the largest cigarette tobacco conglomerate on planet Earth. Altria is the second largest vapor company in the world. They're owned by Philip Morris and part of the third largest tobacco conglomerate in the world. The 2 biggest vaping e-cigarette companies are 2 of the 3 biggest tobacco companies in the world. If this was invented to help people quit smoking, why is the tobacco industry in it? I mean, just think about that for a second. You invent the product to get your customers to stop using your product. That doesn't make sense. Why is the world so blind to the same thing happening all over again? Now, the e-cigarette comes in a lot of different varieties, shapes and sizes and colors and variations, but basically they all have 3 components. There's a power source, which is a battery. There's a reservoir, a wax pod, where the liquid goes, the wax goes, the nicotine goes. That's the second component. The third component is the key. The third component is an atomizer. And the atomizer takes the liquid or the juice or the wax and it heats it up to between 200 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So it could aerosol. Now, when it aerosols out of the device, it enters your respiratory system. But when it goes into your lungs, it doesn't go in as that juice, that nicotine, that flavor. It turns into a volatile organic compound. It's a VOC. It's a toxin. It's a poison as it enters the lungs. Now, the tobacco industry knew exactly what they were doing. Exactly. They wanted to go out and target kids. They created this as a way that America would think it was a way to help people quit smoking. The IQOS, which you probably are not familiar with, but it's a device that's been around for 7 years, but only just got approval by the FDA in October 2019. What the IQOS does is it takes a cigarette and you put the cigarette in the device and it heats the cigarette instead of burning the cigarette. You see, when you light a cigarette, you take a butane lighter and you light the cigarette. Some of the burnt paper and burnt tobacco enters your respiratory system, as does the butane from the lighter. Well, the IQOS, there is no butane because there's no lighter. There's no burnt paper. There's no burnt tobacco. This device was invented early on, 2007, by Philip Morris as a way to make smoking a cigarette safer. Now, there is no safe way to smoke a cigarette. There's a safer way. It's called the IQOS. It's still going to lead to the number one cause of death being cigarette tobacco consumption, but it is a safer method. But the reason why it didn't go to market, the reason why it didn't get FDA approval 12 years ago in 2007 was because the market had shrunk. In 1994, when I showed you that hearing, 54% of adult Americans smoke cigarettes. When this IQOS was invented, less than 20% of adult Americans smoke cigarettes. In fact, it was closer to 10%, and less than 10% of children smoke cigarettes. So the market wasn't big enough. So the tobacco industry decided to flavor the devices, flavor the vapes, and target and marketed children. That's exactly what they did. The vaping device became flavored and targeted to children. Now, most people believe that e-cigarettes are invented to help people quit smoking. In fairness to that theory, even the American Cancer Society says the exact same thing. So I'm in confrontation with the American Cancer Society? Not really. Let me show you their official statement. Smokers who can or won't quit should be encouraged to switch to the least harmful form of tobacco product possible. So the American Cancer Society is stating, as many other people are stating, as every vape shop owner in America is stating, that it's harm reduction. It's safer than consuming a combustible product, a cigarette. Okay, 7 million people die across the globe every single year from cigarettes. If some of those people can quit smoking by going on a vapor, I'm all for it. If smokers can quit smoking by going on a vape, great. Let's do what we did with Sudafed. Let's put it in the pharmacy. If adults want to use vaping as a smoking cessation device, fine. Let's have the pharmacy carry it, and you go get your nicotine cessation vaping pods from a pharmacist. We'll decrease it and we'll use it as a medical device, but that's not what we're going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, the tobacco industry won't allow that. If 7 million people can quit smoking by going on a vape, I'd be all for it. Studies show that less than 10% of people who go on vaping devices actually quit consuming nicotine and tobacco. Most go back to cigarettes, some do both, and some stay on a vape. So they're not quitting. They're changing delivery mechanism. But you see, this is about kids. I'm not talking about adults. I have no opinion, no public opinion on adult use of vaping. I'm talking about children, 21 years of age and younger. I'm talking about kids. Youth use of these devices is an epidemic, and I want to stop kids from beginning. For if they start using a device as a kid, they're more likely to smoke cigarettes as an adult. The tobacco industry flavored these products for a reason, to target children. Now, they went on Nickelodeon with commercials. They went on the Cartoon Network. They took this marketing campaign and they went to where kids were. And the CDC says 32% of high school kids are vaping. It's much higher. It's as high as 70%. We have the largest survey of high school and middle school students in the country, and we're finding 70% of kids are self-reporting vaping. The CDC says 13% of middle school kids are vaping. 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, our surveys show it's as high as 54%. Tobacco use is at its lowest point in decades, the lowest use of cigarette use among kids in our country's history. The American Lung Association had a chart up until 2014 that showed tobacco use, cigarette use among adolescents was plummeting. You know why? This is the smartest generation that's ever lived. They see that smoking kills, so they didn't get started. And if you don't get started, you don't have to figure out how to stop. In 2016, Congress, under the Obama administration, gave the FDA the authority to regulate the e-cigarette industry. And the Obama administration kicked the can down the road. In 2017, under the Trump administration, the FDA was again given that authority and required Well, they told the e-cigarette industry, don't worry about it. We'll give you another 3 years till 2022 to regulate. Well, many state health departments sued, and it took a judge to reverse this. And in 2019, July 12th, the judge gave the FDA the mandatory requirement to regulate this industry. Well, they went back to the e-cigarette industry and said, it's out of our hands. You have 10 months to comply. Problem was, they gave them a 1-year extension if they couldn't meet the deadline. Then they give them a second 1-year deadline. They still gave them 3 more years to further hook our kids. Well, December 20th of 2019, the FDA announced that they were going to make something happen. Well, they were going to make all nicotine products unavailable to anyone under the age of 21. And if anybody believes that's the solution, you don't understand what's happening with alcohol. Making it 21 doesn't keep it out of the hands of kids. It admits the fact that making it 21 does not hinder kids from getting it, okay? Well, January 2nd of 2020, the FDA went one step further. Under pressure, they banned flavors. Problem is, they didn't ban flavors at all. It omitted the entire black and gray market. It omitted the entire marijuana industry, and it only banned closed-end flavored pods from being sold to kids. But it grandfathered every pod that was out there in the market, and the vaping industry has watched this coming for 3 years. They stocked up. There's so much flavored pods out there, and it doesn't matter because with a very couple of clicks on the internet, kids can figure out how to make their own flavored pods. Banning flavored pods does not ban flavors, does not protect kids. You've heard a lot about lung damage and respiratory disorders, but what you're going to start hearing about is hindering brain cancer, increase for high blood pressure among teenagers, cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart attack, circulatory system disorders, nicotine and THC addiction among kids. Some of the chemicals that I have found on testing over 1,500 products include formaldehyde and diacetyl, lead and nickel, vitamin E acetate oils inside these products. All these are toxins for the body. All the causes of death in our country are listed in this chart on your screen. And the number 1 cause of death in America is, of course, heart disease. The number 2 cause of death in America is cancer. And the number 3 cause of death that very few people even talk about is respiratory disorders. Respiratory disease is going to become the number 1 cause of death in America. I've been screaming this for 5 years. It's very ironic through this coronavirus pandemic that people are screaming about ventilators. The one silver lining that's going to come out of the coronavirus epidemic is that this country is going to have hundreds of thousands of ventilators. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to need those ventilators for your children. Respiratory disease is going to become the number 1 cause of death in America. I've been predicting this for 5 years. It will jump cancer. It will jump heart disease to become the number 1 cause of death in America. And I can prove it. One of the things that you're hearing a lot about is popcorn lung, acute respiratory distress syndrome. That's a picture of a lung of a 24-year-old young man who died from acute respiratory distress syndrome. He vaped for 3 years. It's one example of respiratory disease, popcorn lung. It's nicknamed acute respiratory distress syndrome, emphysema, collapsed lungs. These are all examples of respiratory disease, COPD, chronic lower respiratory disease. You're going to hear about this in droves because our 8 to 18-year-old population right now is being targeted with this product, and we're not going to see the full evidence of this for 7 to 10 years. We're about 3rd, 4th year into this pandemic of adolescent use of e-devices. I want to expand a little bit more and explain to you how serious this is. So in October 2019, the CDC named this illness. They called it EVALI. It's an acronym for e-cigarettes vaping associated lung injury. We don't know the mortality. They don't know the morbidity. We don't know what causes it. They don't even really know what it is. They just see it, and now we have a name for it. So it's called EVALI. EVALI is going to be this big umbrella under which all respiratory disease that has to do with vaping is going to to go, but it's really not the answer. So all these devices come in different ways and different formats, and they're, very sleek and pretty and not intrusive, and parents don't know what they are. You can see it laying on your table. Some of them look like mirror compacts. Some of them look like little thumb drives and little pens, okay? And you need to be aware. Juul, you might have heard, Juul, the biggest 80% of the market at one time, and they're decreasing their market share as far as their full devices with their pods. But what people don't know, what people aren't paying attention to, is their parent company, Altria, and how now they are in 80% of all devices and all pods. Pods, the PODS pods, is the little device that snaps into the end of the e-cigarette that contains the nicotine salts and the product. Now, Juul came up with the product nicotine salts, and I want to explain that to you. It's not nicotine. It's nicotine salts. It's raw nicotine, and more closely resembles the raw nicotine off the tobacco plant. It's 3 to 5 times more potent than nicotine. It's raw nicotine. It's like comparing crack cocaine to powder cocaine. It's both cocaine, but the ingestion method's different. The high is different. Its potency is much higher. Nicotine salts is what Juul came up with, and now that's about 80% of the entire industry. So these kids aren't even vaping nicotine, they're vaping nicotine salts. And one of the scariest things about nicotine salts is that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. Nicotine didn't cross the blood-brain barrier, but nicotine salts do. This makes it much more dangerous. We're going to start hearing a lot more about brain disorders and brain cancer from nicotine salts, especially as 8-year-old to 18-year-old children are putting this stuff into their body. Now, every salt nic and every Juul compatible product is out there in the market, and they're really not under the ban of the flavors if they're made out in the field, out in the vape shops by your children. Juul style pods are now made with marijuana, one of the most common ones called Cushy, and they have different flavors, and each little pod goes right into the Juul device, and it's not nicotine or nicotine salts, it's THC. It's marijuana concentrate in a pod that will slip into a commercial device that was sold by a company to market this nicotine salt product to people. Hooli is another name, Stizzy. These are just some of the examples of products that are out there that are targeted and marketed directly to young adults and children that deliver high concentrate THC to the adolescent brain. There's websites out there and there's companies out there that are showing kids how to put THC or how to put any drug into a pod to go into a Juul device. This is one company telling kids how to put weed in their Juul pod. Well, not only weed and THC could go into a Juul pod, but so can any other drug. So many of these companies are out there. I know of 80 different companies that are selling different flavors, 1,500 flavors. I went into shops in New York and Vermont and Massachusetts and Colorado and California, and the amount of flavors and the amount of products that are out there blew my mind. This is a pen, an actual pen called the Cloud V pen, where a kid can actually have a pen writing on the paper and then take the top of the pen, put it up to their mouth, and they can ingest THC while they're sitting in their classroom, while they're sitting in their bedroom doing homework, and you come in and see a pen on the table. You don't know that it's an actual vape device, and it's only about $40. You need to be aware. You need to be aware of inhalers that look just like asthma inhalers, okay? Vaporizers that are not asthma inhalers, they're delivering THC concentrates in a mist right into your kid's lungs. You need to be aware of a watch. There's a vape watch out on the market now where the kid can just put his hand right up to his mouth and vape through the watch. It's a working watch where the face comes off and the vaping THC concentrate insert goes under the face of the watch. There's inhalers out there that were originally designed to inhale melatonin, but the Puffit company saw all the opportunity by getting into THC, and now they're selling flavored marijuana THC devices for children, colorful flavors, colorful devices. There's apparel out there, vapor hoodies, where the string of the hoodie can be hooked up to the vaping device inside the pocket, and the other string you could vape right out of. Very, very intriguing for kids. Is that what we're doing to help adults quit smoking? No, it's what we're doing to hook the next generation on nicotine. This is a device that's very dangerous that I saw years ago that I've been warning people about, called the Dank Tank. I went to the place that they were making it, and I was allowed to take pictures. I couldn't videotape, but I was allowed to take pictures. That's a man holding a 3-foot Pyrex tube. These tubes go in these machines from floor to ceiling, about 300 tubes in the machine, and the Pyrex tubes are full of THC flower concentrate. They blast butane or propane through one side, and what comes out the other side is this: wax and shatter and butter, 80-90% THC potency. And that wax, that shatter, that liquid can go into these vaping devices, and kids can use them on these pens in these devices. We're talking about 80 to 90% pure potent concentrate THC, but the industry calls it marijuana. This is called marijuana. That's 100% pure THCA crystalline. That's not marijuana, but it's sold and defined as marijuana. It's 100% pure THC crystal. Ladies and gentlemen, what this is going to do to children, what this is going to do to our next generation, what this is going to do to people who are using it is beyond comprehension. We've got to put caps on this. We've got to protect people, and we've got to educate people. And so that's what we're trying to do. When I saw those vape vials, when I made my movie Marijuana X, which is available on our website, and you can also watch it on YouTube, Marijuana X. When I saw those vape vials, I knew where we were going. I just didn't think that we would get there so fast. And kids' perception of harm is decreasing. And when you decrease the perception of harm, the use explodes. If kids don't think it's a problem, their use explodes. A lot of people don't understand and realize how that happens. When kids don't think it's a problem, boy, their use explodes. Now, we're putting all sorts of drugs into vaping devices. This was $210 million recently coming into our country from China through Australia, liquid methamphetamine in bottles. This was 2 kids in West Virginia who were rushed to the hospital out of their high schools. And when their vape devices were investigated, they found heroin in their vape pens. These are 4 kids in Utah that were found to have methamphetamine in their vape pens. These are 2 brothers in Wisconsin who were running an entire lab with 12 employees in Kenosha, and they were selling millions of dollars. When the police busted them, they had 98,000 empty THC pods getting ready to be filled with THC, 57 mason jars full of THC liquid, 31,200 pods that were already filled and packaged, going out to kids and adults all over the country. Fully illegal, but think about that for a second. It's going to different stores. North Carolina did 1,000 CBD vape purchase and found that they had synthetic marijuana in very, very large amount of what they had purchased in retail stores. Florida did the same thing and found illegal drugs spiked in all these pods that were being sold in retail stores. So if you go out there in a bodega or a convenience store or a gas station and you think you're buying CBD, there's a real high likelihood that you're not. The academic potential, the addiction potential, the suicide potential is what I'm scared of. And so what I wanted to share with you today is a lot of information. And you can go to our website, steeredstraight.org, to take what I shared today, see it again, but also investigate it further. Continuing education as a parent is critically important. Cognitive function of your child, their psychological capacity is going to be impacted in a negative way by stimulating the brain with nicotine, by hallucinating the brain with THC, and also, as I didn't share today, but just a little bit, depressing the brain with alcohol. Alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana are the three drugs most used by kids, the three drugs most cited by 90% of every addict in America, where it all began between the ages of 8 and 18. Please, ladies and gentlemen, keep your eye out for something called CHS, cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. It's a real problem where the vomiting is uncontrolled. The gastrointestinal system is controlled by the THC concentrate, and it's had a 2,500% increase in the last 10 years among adolescents. CIP, cannabis-induced psychosis, where so much of the psychosis is induced by high concentrate, high potent THC cannabis. Please, ladies and gentlemen, keep your eye out for this. It's really, really, really going to start to be more prevalent in our country. The marijuana use among adolescents changes the development of the brain, and every study will show you that young adult brains of people who use marijuana at a young age were smaller. The brains of marijuana users are different, especially if they start young. Understand psychosis is so prevalent among marijuana users, and it's increasing the potency of psychosis in study after study after study. Investigate further. Now, I raised some concerns about teen vaping and marijuana in 2018 in an article, but the concern is not being heeded to. Now I'm raising concern about addiction to nicotine. As we close schools in 2020 all across this country, some kids are out of that structured environment for 6 months. Vaping is increasing. Calls to suicide hotlines have jumped 800%. Use of marijuana is increasing. Use of alcohol is increasing. Domestic violence is increasing. These are all the problems and collateral damage coming from that coronavirus epidemic that no one's talking about. I'm not trying to minimize the seriousness of COVID-19 and the people who've lost their life dying with the virus, not from, but with the virus. I'm not trying to minimize that. But ladies and gentlemen, we've got people that are dying from all these collateral problems and the damage incurred by shutting our country down, and people aren't paying attention to it. That's what we need to focus on going forward. This virus is going to go away. The damage from suicide addiction is not going to go away. We're going to lose a generation. Please understand, kids are getting addicted to nicotine. When I went into Walmart, I looked at all the products that were available for smoking cessation. I found many options. But do you know something? None of them are available for kids. I turned all the boxes around, and on the back of the box is a warning. If you're under 18 years of age, ask a doctor before using, because no studies have been done to show if the product will work for you. You know all that legal paperwork on the inside that none of us ever read? We just hope that nothing goes wrong. Well, I read it all. You know what it says? No studies have ever been done on safety under the age of 18. So are you going to provide your child a product that's never been tested on a child before it hit the retail shelf? Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a way to help our children with smoking addiction, with nicotine addiction, with vaping addiction to nicotine. This is a problem. CBS Morning News, January of 2019, had the Commissioner of Health from New York on there, and he made a statement. He said, vaping among teens and kids threatens 5 decades of public health gains. 50 years of public health gains is being thrown out the window right now due to vaping, and no one's paying attention. Let me share this with you as I close. The top 5 causes of death for adolescents are on your screen. Accidents is number 1, which is the 1/3 of all kids die in an accident. The problem with that is 2/3 of those accidents are a car. And 2/3 of those accidents, the driver was under the influence of alcohol and drugs. When we cite accidents as the number 1 cause of death, 15 to 24, I have to tell people it's not an accident. It's a drug or an alcohol driving accident. That's what's killing kids. Number 1 cause. Number 2 is suicide. 95% of all suicide is drug and alcohol related. Number 3 is homicide. Trust me, I've never been involved in a juvenile homicide, never investigated it, never researched it that wasn't drug and alcohol related. And the number 4 cause of death in America for 15 to 24 is a drug overdose and alcohol poisoning. So when people tell me, Michael, the 4th leading cause of death for kids is drugs and alcohol, I said, no, it's not. It's 1, it's 2, it's 3, and it's 4. But let me share something that should shock you. According to the CDC in 2000, respiratory disorders for that age demographic, 15 to 24, was number 16. 10 years later, in 2010, it became number 10. Now it's number 6. Respiratory disease shouldn't be killing kids from 15 to 24. People who smoked for 50 years, people who worked with asbestos, people who have COPD, CLRD, respiratory disease should be killing 70 and 80 and 90-year-old people. Shouldn't be killing 15 to 24-year-old kids. How is respiratory disorders jumped from 16 to 6 in 20 years? It's because of e-cigarettes and vaping devices. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the hidden pandemic that's growing right now that people aren't paying attention. I'm asking you to pay attention to it. Please go to our website and watch 54 Minutes, Marijuana X. It's a documentary that'll blow your socks off. It'll really open your eyes. I'm asking you to watch it, then make your own opinion. You can follow me on Facebook. Our public figure page and Steered Straight's public figure page is right on Facebook. And we put up daily reminders and education so parents can continue to educate themselves. And please visit our website, steeredstraight.org. You can buy your book, Table Talks and Dashboard Conversations. You could get further information. You could meet our authors, Shayna Fool and Darla De Leon, meet all our speakers. Please, Shayna has a book coming out. Darla has a book coming out. If I ever finish it, my book will be out this year. You can see all of our documentary films and all of our videos for parents. Thank you so much. It was a very, very much a pleasure to be a part of this. I really appreciate your time and attention. SteeredStraight.org. I'm Michael De Leon. God bless you.
What an incredible video.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, the information that he just puts out would just blow your mind. And I think there's a lot of people out there who really don't know the real talk, the real truth about it.
So, yeah, so not only Michael De Leon and him being 12 years plus in this field, he's his heart, his passion, and his commitment to impact the youth and change the community. Knowing him personally, him and his entire team there at Steered Straight, we're really hoping that, once again, we really hope that the information you just received, you've learned something. I know I do every time I'm around him, that you will go on, click on, get a certificate of completion. You're not going to get any better drug prevention education in the country. Michael De Leon, founder of Steered Straight, just a phenomenal man to be around, and a program and outreach that he does. Go to all his platforms there, join him, learn more about Michael De Leon, and support steeredstraight.org. I also would like to take the time out. If you're watching at the beginning, Michael De Leon, we talked about the table talks. And Matt, I know you're a husband and a father and a brother and a son. And on behalf of the 108 Challenge and SteeredStraight.org, we went ahead and ordered Matt and his family the table talks. Please go to SteeredStraight.org. You can order yours today. Take the time, 15 minutes a week. 15 minutes a week to have those conversations. It's right here in the book. So, Matt, on behalf of the 108 Challenge, Steered Straight, that's yours, sir.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. You know, it is important as a parent, a father, a counselor, and, just everything I do, that, having something like that, just getting the real talk, the real message out there to our kids. I want to say this is that, before we move on, if you're a parent, if you think that your kids aren't being exposed to this, if you can't have those real conversations with them, if you feel like you can't talk with them, then you're missing the point. Because guess what? I can tell you, as a parent of a 23-year-old, a 20-year-old, and a 16-year-old, that this is everywhere. And I would rather, as a parent, take it head on and have those serious, real conversations with them than to not think that they're living in a bubble and thinking that they're not being exposed.
Absolutely. You heard Michael De Leon as well, Matt. They need to hear it from you. Parents, They need to hear it from you. So take the time out and have those table talks.
Yeah. And that's for teachers too, teachers as well. All right. So I know we have some sponsors that we want to talk about real quick, and I'm going to share the screen and show a quick video.
I'm Admiral Sandy Winnefeld. 2 years ago, my wife Mary and I lost our son Jonathan to an accidental opioid overdose. We founded SAFE Project to help overcome the addiction epidemic and keep others from experiencing our family's tragedy. Addiction to prescription drugs is a public safety issue and often starts in the home medicine cabinet. Through our partnership with doTERRA, we can help keep medications out of the wrong hands. Let's make every day Drug Take Back Day. Visit doterrasystem.com/safe to receive your free doTERRA pouch and help be part of the solution.
Thank you. Through Sunday, May 10th, people across the country can request a free doTERRA drug deactivation pouch to safely and permanently deactivate prescription medications from the comforts of their home.
Apologize about that. So yeah, that's just a great organization. We're looking forward to working with them. They're doing a lot of great things out there. And so let's go to the next sponsor that we have.
Absolutely. And make sure you click on safeproject.us to learn more about Safe Project as well. So also want to recognize Cardinal Innovations at this time. Cardinal Innovations Healthcare here in the state of North Carolina. Their entire team there is phenomenal to work with. As North Carolina's largest managed care organization, Cardinal Innovation Healthcare provides access to Medicaid and public health services and supports to help people with complex needs, including substance abuse disorders, live their best lives. And to learn more about Cardinal, go to cardinalinnovations.org. Also want to give a shout out to Wake Forest Baptist Health, Care for Life, CFL, for the awesome tumblers that we have today. We're drinking out of. Thank you very much. They were also concerned about us being here. So we've got our little hand sanitizer there to stay nice and sanitized. So thank you, Wake Forest Baptist Health. And then finally, wanted to give a shout out to a lifelong friend there in Columbia, South Carolina, Sound and Images, S&I. See my man, Adam Vance, down there in Columbia, South Carolina, for all your audio and video needs. Adam is your man to take care of you.
Yep. All right. So let's move on. You ready?
Yes, sir.
You ready for this part?
Absolutely.
Who would have thought that a baseball could be such an important tool? And I'm telling you, from somebody who played college baseball, who lived his life on the baseball field, who is now an umpire, who cares about being on the field and cares about our youth, that a tool like a baseball could be so important. And so our next speaker is you. And this is an incredible story that you have and an incredible organization you have. You and I have formed an incredible friendship over the last year. This event was supposed to be in a church, with Pastor Al Green. It was going to be an incredible event. And unfortunately, COVID-19, stopped us from having a live event, or stopped you from having a live event that I was going to help you with. But we didn't stop there. And we actually made it bigger. So, Eric, I cannot appreciate your friendship more. I cannot appreciate the things that you've done. But everybody, you need to pay attention to this next piece. And you're going to hear from Eric. And this is just an incredible story about the things that you've gone through and how baseball has changed things and how you're helping people. So I truly appreciate it. And everybody, enjoy this next part.
I think one of the most traumatizing words that we can say to ourselves is that'll never happen to me, right? I mean, life has a funny way of proving us wrong. But I don't think anybody wakes up or one day saying, I want to be homeless, or I want to live in a cardboard box, or I want to overdose on fentanyl or anything like that. I don't believe anybody, wants that. Early, addictive behavior and substance abuse can be very life altering. And to me, it was 29 years of substance abuse.
All right, Eric. So this is just real talk for interviewing you, getting your story out there, helping people understand, helping youth understand that getting involved in drug culture is just not worth it. From a personal testimony, from a personal story that you've come through so much, and then realizing that at the end of it, there wasn't any payoff. There wasn't anything worth it. Tell me a little bit about that in your story, and how you tell me a little bit about how you started down that road.
Yeah. So right into it, right. My name is Eric. I grew up in Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. I was the youngest sibling. So I had older brothers and other sisters. My mom, she had a in-home daycare in her house. So we had a lot of friends. We grew up in a community. We loved sports, vacationing, going to the pool, visiting family. So Thanksgiving was big. Christmas was big, So we were a family-oriented home. And but even though I'm taking you back, I want to fast forward a little bit to in that story in 1981, our family was visiting my mom's parents in Thomasville, North Carolina. And on a Sunday afternoon, we were traveling back to our hometown, Durham. Nothing could prepare us for that day when we were traveling back and what was going to happen. But we were coming down Highway 54. This was before a lot of the interstates were built. And on the other side of the hill was a gentleman passing in a no passing zone, doing about 80 miles an hour. He was intoxicated. And we were traveling on the other side of the hill coming up. So you can imagine what happened at the top of that hill, head-on collision. The other driver of that car was killed instantly. I was sitting in the front seat. I had broke my jaw, my arm, 3 fingers, had about 90 stitches in my head. My mom, she wasn't so lucky. She would go through the floor of the van. She would crush every bone from her hip down and both her legs. She had to have metal rods installed to help her walk. She would spend 2 years in a hospital bed and then another year in rehab. My dad, he was mildly injured, but at that time it triggered Parkinson's disease. And back then they didn't have a lot of research for it. So my dad, he would come, a little violent, a little abusive in the home. And ultimately 5 years later, my parents, they had their own reasons, why, but they would separate and ultimately divorce. I was at age 13 at that time. That's when I, started experimenting with marijuana and alcohol, and, something I thought that was not such a big deal at the time. Kind of led me into, nicotine and tobacco. And then here I was off into these addictive behaviors and patterns, not really knowing and understanding what I was doing. I could quit whenever I wanted to, not that big of a deal. Come to find out, at the time I was 15, I was selling cocaine and using cocaine, breaking into cars. I would rip and run the streets at all hours of the night. By the time I was 16, I'd get my license. And a week later after that, I would get a DUI and I would lose my license, my sophomore year. So here I was kind of limping my way into my junior and senior year, losing all focus of what meant most to me, family and sports and friends. And by the time I was in senior in high school, drugs, had me in a chokehold completely. And I was a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school. I want to fast forward to 2004, but in between that time, I was in and out of jail. I was always running from my addictions. I was always, kind of ashamed, embarrassed, and, going from town to town. But in 2004, I was arrested for possession, attempt to sell, maintaining, dwelling, and trafficking crack cocaine. And I would serve 14 months, locked up, and then into a release program. That's where, I had to, that was my sentencing at the time. So after I was kind of complied with everything with that, I was right back into the world, kind of went right back to what I knew. I'll fast forward all the way to 2018. I was living in Greenville, South Carolina. This particular afternoon, I would be right back at my same destructive lifestyle and using and things like that. And fentanyl, which was, a highly synthetic opioid, that's what a lot of people are overdosing on now in our country, was mixed into my drugs, not knowingly. I used it. 15 minutes later, there I was laying in a room, overdosed. Luckily, individual had seen me in the room at the time. They couldn't get me revived, no heartbeat, no pulse, done turned purple, face, hands. It took about 15 minutes for the law enforcement, first responders to get there. They had to hit me with Narcan twice. That is a opioid reversal, of the known name is naloxone. So I would go to the Greenville, South Carolina hospital there. And, I think it was 3 to 5 days later, they would release me. I didn't have insurance. I wasn't a priority. They got me stable. So there I was out of an emergency room, broke, busted, disgusted, the clothes on my back, no driver's license, hungry, no one there to meet me or greet me or pick me up, just devastated, and that was kind of just the worst feeling in the world. Here I was, in a town I wasn't from, overdosed on fentanyl, in a parking lot with nowhere to go. So that's, kind of where I felt like, obviously, most people would agree, I needed a major life change.
Mm-hmm. just to go back a little bit and talking about growing up in the family situation, things like that. When you first started experimenting with drugs, using drugs and things like that, did anybody in your family know?
So I'm going to say no. I was the youngest. I always hung around with the oldest crowd. My family has no past history of any substance abuse, whether it be alcohol or drugs. None of my sisters and brothers, really used or had issues with it. I'm going to say no. My mom was a single parent, working two jobs, trying to make ends meet. My siblings were off to college and school. Always had, hung out with the older crew and older crowd, and so, I fell into kind of the, what was cool, fitting in, peer pressure. That was that mentality. It wasn't really anything. It wasn't my circumstances, it was always my choices. It was always, what I thought was cool or what was the cool thing to do, and not knowing and not being educated on what that lifestyle was and what those effects could have on me, all the way up to today, today's time.
Right. And I think it's important to realize, like you said, that you are not the victim of circumstance, but that you are the outcome of choice, because there's always a choice in the matter. And I had a question about, did drugs find you, or did you go looking for them initially?
Yeah, so back then, unlike it is today, where it's no shortage of finding a drink on every corner, or drugs and alcohol and paraphernalia in stores and stuff like that. Back when I grew up, it was pretty accessible too. There was no shortage of it. I mean, especially when you're talking about marijuana and cocaine and crack cocaine, where today now we've evolved, into the opioids and heroin and meth and synthetics and on and on and on. So what back then I thought was kind of an experimental stage, is not that way now. It's not. Now it's kind of, don't use drugs, get clean and sober, or it could be fatal. So we don't know what's in it now. They're mixed with so many different things.
And this is to back up just a little bit, when you're mentioning about overdosing on fentanyl, that you said you were unbeknownst to you.
Yeah, so I knew what fentanyl was. I knew that since my drug of choice was not so much opioids, that we were, drug dealers. They're not really chemists or anything like that. They obviously, if they can get fentanyl cheaper, they're going to mix it in there to give a more higher potency. My drug of choice was different. So when I used, not knowing that fentanyl was in there, how devastating to overdose on something that wasn't really your drug of choice. That's something that I would never want to experience again. The fact of waking up to knowing that you were dead and that you had to be revived, and then you've got EMS and you've got police officers and you got all these lights in your face and you got people, IVs running in your arms, and you're soaking wet for whatever reason that you're soaking wet for, and that, you're shoved in the back of an ambulance. You have no clue what's going on. I mean, that's not an experience I'd ever want to experience again in my entire life. That was pretty devastating. It was that point of no return for my life. It was that point that I needed a major life change.
Because like you said, you were literally dead at that point.
Yeah, for right at 15 minutes. Most people don't come back from this, or they're struggling with some type of brain issues.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was 45. 45 years of age. Mm-hmm. Dating back all the way to when I was 13 years of age, when I thought that something as innocently as maybe I thought at the time of smoking a cigarette, chewing tobacco, taking a drink, puffing on some marijuana, I had no clue.
Most people don't wake up one morning and decide to overdose on fentanyl, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I never wanted to be an addict. I never wanted to be somebody that, I think one of the most traumatizing words that we can say to ourselves is that'll never happen to me. Right. Life has a funny way of proving us wrong. But I don't think anybody wakes up or one day saying, I want to be homeless, or I want to live in a cardboard box, or I want to overdose on fentanyl or anything like that. I don't believe anybody wants that. But the truth and reality is that you develop those addictive behaviors, something you think is so innocent now, like the vaping being so popular, the liquid THC, what it does to the adolescent brain that develops them, early, addictive behavior and substance abuse can be very life altering. And to me, it was 29 years of substance abuse.
Looking back over that entire history, over 29 years of substance and drug abuse, what does that feel like now, today, looking back on it?
It's like breaking every heart that you've ever touched. I have a son, and I couldn't even look my own son in his eyes. I can see the hurt and the pain, but it still, couldn't get me to get clean and sober. It's like being hungry, and you have the money to buy some food, but you go buy drugs anyways. It's like being able to hang on to any job you ever had, getting a paycheck on Friday, and then Saturday morning, you're broke. It's like actually telling the truth to somebody, but they think you're lying anyways because you've lied over and over and over. It's like being invited to a birthday party or Christmas or Thanksgiving and never showing up. It's like not able to put your clothes don't fit no more because you've lost so much weight because all you do is drugs all the time. That's about as raw as I can be with it. It's just that spiral staircase that just continues to go down and down. There's no bottom.
During that time, throughout that history, were there any moments of clarity, I guess you'd say, where you were afraid of what came next?
Yeah. So one thing I left out was substance abuse was like committing suicide every single day on the installment plan. It was like, you didn't want to die, but you didn't, you were willing to risk taking one more hit, one more blow, and you were willing to accept those consequences. So, for me, that lifestyle right there, those circumstances behind that just didn't matter, man. It was like a hostage of the brain. It was like, it wasn't a bad person. I didn't grow up that way. I wasn't taught that way. My closest friends, that wasn't their path. It was my choice after choice that continued me down that destructive pathway. And I just didn't know how to raise my hand and say, I need help. I was too embarrassed and too ashamed.
And what is it that helped you to get to that point where you said, I do need help? And what is it that brought you to that breaking point to where there was effective change?
I did have some few people in my life that never gave up on me, that continued to pray for me. My mom being one, another close friend of mine, that they just never gave up on me, and, when I limped my way back home from Greenville, South Carolina, I had a few people reach out to me and say that, look, we know you're in this spot, you're in a bad spot, but we're here for you. And then connecting with a peer support person, somebody I could talk to about my lifestyle that can kind of see through all the madness and not have their emotions caught up in it, that they can relate to my path. It would be difficult for me to go talk to maybe a pastor or a teacher or a mentor that's not gone down that path because they maybe can't relate to it. And that's when I kind of started marking, baseball stitches, on a baseball. And that's how that kind of got started, the whole 108 challenge concept. I didn't think that recovery was ever about following the path of somebody else. I always thought about recovery for me being something that best fits me and how I can work my recovery one day at a time.
Because you're a unique individual, right? You have a unique circumstance, and trying to shove somebody into a box that already feels, like you said, alienated and outcast, like that's going to be pretty tough for them because it's not going to be applicable, right?
Yeah. So, I don't really discriminate or judge how anybody finds recovery. I think there's all different models out there that can be effective. I just felt like that, for me personally, it was better for me to connect. I feel that recovery is about connection. I think it's about building you a network of people around you, where accountability sometimes is missed in recovery, integrity, sometimes the little things in recovery that you have to do every day to remind yourself not to go back to those destructive lifestyle. That's important.
And then to take that experience, like you said, that you would never want to repeat that. You wouldn't wish that on anybody. What was it like getting into recovery and and meeting someone else that had a similar experience with fentanyl, that was walking a similar path to you, that now has realized I have to make a change. I have to change.
Yeah, so peer support is very vital and very key to me. One that we can talk through our struggles, whether it's a movie that's on, running into an old acquaintance, whether it's kind of feeling isolated and bored like a lot of us are in the country right now. Whether it's that stinking thinking, I call it, that creeps back into my mind. As I look back on it, I don't see that like drugs and alcohol is my biggest challenge. I was my biggest challenge. It was me. I have a saying that I tell students all the time. I look in the mirror and it's laughed at me a few times, right? But it's never lied to me. That mirror always tells me the truth, no matter what. But being able to connect with somebody that's gone down a similar path is vitally key to me in recovery, that you can talk through some of them things that you're struggling with when you start feeling the walls close in and getting bored and things like that.
If you could, what would you say to your younger self when you first started getting into drug abuse and things like that?
Wow, man, if I could go back to the younger self. One would be slow down. We live in such a fast paced, got to have it now mentality world, right? I mean, growing up, man, I know what was cool, what was hot, what was hip, what was not. But, I didn't have the first clue about addiction and substance abuse and prioritizing things in my life, goal setting, respecting my teachers. Teachers is a huge thing. I think that a lot of times we, if we're a student or a middle school or high school or even a college student, we may be going through something personal in our life. We may be struggling with our homework. We may be struggling to fit in with different groups or people. And we don't talk about it. I think that, it's one of the mentalities, like, you don't know, raise your hand and ask. It's one of them things to raise your hand. I need help. I'm struggling with this. I need help. I need somebody to surround me. I need people around me that can, be positive, that can push me in the right direction, to help me with my goal setting, my career, and, what my measurement of success is and how I can perform in life. I think that's huge. If I could really go back, it would be to reach out and talk to people about things that you're struggling with.
And you touched on it a little bit. You mentioned the measurement of success. How do you teach somebody to understand what that means to measure success?
To me, it's impacting another life. It's encouraging somebody. It's educating them. It's informing them. It's giving them fact-based information on whatever that is. I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody wanting to live in a big house and having, real nice cars and the big bank account. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But that was never my measurement of success. My measurement of success always meant connection. My measurement of success always meant networking and putting myself around people that can help me go places in my life. Surround myself with that group, man, that can, give me wisdom and knowledge. So whatever your measurement of success is, or whatever that might be, I would say to the youth, have the courage to find out what that is and build your entire life around it. And don't let nobody tell you can't do it. Shoot for your dreams, man. Go for it.
Mm-hmm. And that, all things that are building and surrounding to why you developed the 108 Challenge. And so tell me a little bit about the 108 Challenge, how that came about.
Well, as you can see behind me, I have some trophies, but this is my sixth baseball, right? So I'm well over 600 days in this new life. And so the 108 Challenge, I wasn't the best athlete growing up. I competed in anything. I didn't care what it was. I wanted to beat you in everything. I was just really headstrong that I was better than you. But not so much the case. But baseball was something that was huge, especially with me and some of my closest friends. And, when I thought about recovery and how that mindset of one day at a time and this tool, never created it for anybody else. I only created it for myself. And, I looked at these stitches on this ball and I realized, man, these stitches, they have a job. They have a job to hold this baseball together. No matter how hard that person swings and that bat hits this ball, it's got to hold this thing together and not shatter it. And, so I thought, okay, wow, how many stitches are on this? I didn't even know, right? So I had to Google it, found out it was 108 stitches. So anyways, I felt like recovery was the same way, that no matter, or even life challenges or adversity we face, it don't even have to be recovery. It's just like going through our life, growing up, learning, just life in general, no matter how life, hits me, no matter how hard I'm challenged with things. I can resonate with this. This is something visual. I can see concrete in the palm of my hand and mark every single day. It's a reminder of how I can get up and face my day no matter what. And I thought this would be a great tool for people, that if you're serious about your recovery or a life change, if you're serious about taking a stand of challenging misconceptions about drugs and alcohol, living a drug-free life, that this is a great reminder. It's a great tool every single day, that no matter how hard life hits, man, one day at a time, we take that approach, we can have a successful life. So that kind of birthed the 108 Challenge, man. That was kind of the concept behind it, and bang, here we are,
That's awesome. And what's kind of, tell me, what's the mission of the 108 Challenge? What's your goal?
4 years ago, man, we had 70,000+ people die of overdose. And we start looking at that age range, man. You start looking at, kids getting younger and younger. It's seeping into our, middle schools and high schools and things like that. And I got to thinking about me and how I got started. So now the 108 Challenge has kind of evolved to the 108 Challenge Drug Prevention Education. I mean, our goals is to impact the youth. It's to give them fact-based information, so they can at least make an informed decision and be understanding of their consequences when they make them. We glamorize, alcohol, now the vaping and the liquid THC and the new marijuana movement. We're telling our youth, that it's okay. We're telling them it's okay to use and this, that, and other, but nobody tells them the other side of the equation. They don't tell them about the life challenges, the health issues that you may have, your career, all the devastating effects they can have on it. So we want to make sure that at least they have the other side of the equation and they're informed about it.
Right. Because it's one thing to tell a person a statistic. It is another thing to show a person this is what life looks like on the other side of this, and to show it from somebody, even from a personal anecdote, from somebody who is similar to them in age or class. And that's the other thing is the drug abuse transcends every socioeconomic layer there is.
Correct. So this thing has no race. It has no color. It doesn't care what side of tracks you grew up on. It doesn't care if you lived in a small home, big home, what kind of car mommy and daddy drives, who's got the coolest cell phone, who's the coolest, who's the most talented, this football star, the best. It doesn't matter. It doesn't discriminate. I mean, we're all one decision away from things going terribly wrong in our life. I mean, we need to, our parents need to tell their kids, they need to have this role play stuff, if you're faced with, hey, take a, toke off this vaping device, or hey, try this pill, or here's this solo cup, man, they need to know what to say. They already need to know and be informed about it.
As far as the 108 Challenge is concerned, kind of give me the nuts and bolts of what that looks like as far as the program is concerned, like coming into schools and.
Sure. So obviously, a school reaches out to us. We target schools ourselves, whether it be a city school, county school, charter school, private school, day schools. It doesn't matter to us. If it's a local school, we're a free service. We don't charge anything. Obviously, if we have to travel or fly or stay in hotels, then that's a little different. We have those conversations with them. But when they get the 108 Challenge, they get myself and a 90-minute PowerPoint presentation. It can be shorter if need be, on whatever the trending topics there at the school. So if it's, obviously now the big thing is vaping and the THC and the high concentrates with that. Obviously pain meds and opioids have always is a topic of discussion. If it's meth, whatever that is, you see these posters, we do them all. And like I said, we partner with the #1 school curriculum in the country. So they get that as well with the Educator's Guide. So long after we leave through our PowerPoint presentation, they continue to teach and educate the students. Pamphlets from marijuana, cocaine, meth, LSD, whatever it is they want, we give it to them, and they can continue to educate them throughout the school year. We also are geared up to come in and do the faculty in the afternoon after we do the students. That way they can kind of hear a very similar message. So